specifically identifying ELL and special ed students. But with respect to RTI, you know, again, if we looked at our data, our core is not meeting the needs of all of our students, right? If you conceptually look at the RTI model, 80 to 90% of your students should reach proficiency if you have high quality instruction with aligned curriculum and effective instructional strategies for students. We're not doing that. And so no amount of intervention, as far as I'm concerned, or no, based on research and practice, is going to address the fact that our core instruction isn't meeting the needs of all of our students. And then on top of, you know, core is the intervention and enrichment. But everybody needs intervention and enrichment, quite frankly. So we need to think about how do we create a system of acceleration for all students that addresses everybody getting high quality core instruction, and then using the time that we put into our calendar and our schedules for in terms of the length of the school day, which I know we're going to talk about later, as effectively as we possibly can.
And we clearly recognize that. This was specific to the challenge that we're having with ELL and special ed students, and that's why it was written that way.
Yeah, and I think having it's, you know, it's specifically addressing, but I think let's not forget about the fact that we have when we pull that data out and look at the performance of our students that are not ELL and not special ed, across the board, we are not meeting the needs of all of our, what I would consider typical populations either. And so it's not just a matter of addressing special ed and ELL for me in terms of RTI. It's making sure that, again, back to each individual student growing no matter where they started, but if we don't have a plan for enrichment for those students who need extension activities, or we don't have a plan for acceleration for those students who are deficient in their skills, then, you know, if it's not on paper and it's not an expectation that all students have opportunities in the RTI model, and I think we're going to miss out again on an opportunity to impact student learning.
We do have until 11:15 on this, so.
And we do have another part.
Okay, so
We have multiples too.
We can certainly, as we continue to work on this, we can certainly bring that back.
Can I ask a question about T4S? It might be for asking West Ed and coming back. Have they aligned T4S to the Common Core and the instructional shifts? Or are they having
I don't
plans to?
know the answer to that question. Of course, the T4S is much broader and more in-depth than what we use. I don't know for sure if they've made any specific changes to it in terms of the new direction. Do you have any information on that?
I can speak to our understanding of the T4S as it's currently written. 2 years ago, it was refined within the first set around the instructional objectives to include making sure that those objectives were framed at the DOK level 2 or higher. And then the follow-up to that is making sure that the instruction is implemented at a level of DOK 2 or higher. So that puts us in a good position in terms of Common Core alignment. The other part is that we've actually been getting this question a lot from teachers. How's the T4S going to work now that I'm implementing Common Core? And so as we've looked at the T4S, what we see is that under instructional scaffolding, for example, instructional scaffolding is a category of high-yield instructional practices that you can do, which include modeling and explaining, and providing teacher-led practice, or providing teacher-led practice, or providing differentiation, or providing a student-led learning experience. So it is, I think, much more, it has the capacity to be much more open-ended than we have potentially interpreted it up to this point in time. A teacher who is in a middle grade science classroom, for example, or a math classroom, is doing a student-facilitated kind of experience, could still get great feedback and be doing the right things for Common Core and for T4S based on selecting the right instructional strategy for that objective, for that particular set of learning needs. So I don't believe that it needs significant refinement. I think, back to the discussion on messaging, I think it's about helping people understand those connections and those relationships, because they really are there. There's a whole other set of techniques for engagement, for example, that include activities such as summarization, comparing, contrasting, finding similarities and differences, and all of those lend themselves very, very well to a Common Core implementation. We just have to help everybody, we have to build shared understanding and give people examples about how to do that within the context of Common Core. And then there's all the other parts around language. One of the things that we added this past year for verbal scaffolding was the, with WestEd of course, the aligned strategies from the ELD methodologies, which include having students speak in complete sentences and having students speak 50% of the time or more. When you think about Common Core implementation and the kinds of connections kids are going to have to make as they work within those shifts, those are natural alignments. So I think we're in a good position with the T4S, but it's about our PD, it's about our coaching and our work with our leaders as they go out and work with the teachers to make sure that they really are able to capitalize on that.
So then maybe it's more the initiative under Objective 4 around representative committee creating an accountability system, right? Because I think the elements in the instructional shifts are then more likely to be seen through some system that's created that evaluates instructional units or lesson plans and so on to determine, you know, do we see a balance, a 50-50 distribution of informational text or literary text? Do we see more and significant kinds of writing? Do we see a focus on academic vocabulary? Do we see, you know, some of those pieces where, again, if I'm what I hear from teachers across the board, not only in our district, is if I'm teaching the Common Core and I'm implementing the strategies and the instructional shifts that I'm supposed to be doing, that type of teaching and learning looks different than the type of teaching and learning that my administrator might have expected me to be doing prior to the Common Core. And so a real legitimate worry and concern is, well, how will I be evaluated? If my leader thinks that I should be doing a lot more, let's, as an example, do direct instruction, and in terms of having students have more discussion and dialogue and everybody engaging, it's really exactly maybe the opposite when my leader comes in to do an observation or evaluation of me, right? They don't want there to be a disconnect between effective implementation and then an evaluation piece. So I just want to make sure that, again, we're not setting the system up for failure if teachers are legitimately worried about implementing the core and the strategies and then having a disconnect between what we're having our observers come in and evaluate, because that will surely be, the formula for
And
not
that's
success.
a point well taken. When you're looking at that annual initiative for the for that specific objective, currently we have a set of rubrics that each principal and leadership team are evaluated on. And within that includes the instructional pieces around the CT4S and how that school and how that staff is progressing on those. So I think what I'm hearing you say is making sure that as we restructure that system to make sure that there is alignment between those instructional strategies which are aligned and will support the implementation of the shifts and the practices with that whole accountability system that we currently are revising.
Yes, because what I'm worried about, and having been in a neighboring school district and have done some of this work and admittedly probably done it badly, right? So as I reflect on the years of my attempts to get these kinds of initiatives through, again, sometimes the unintended consequences that either leaders or teachers misinterpret what we've asked them to do in ways that we never intended them to, become translated. And worries that I have when I speak to teachers, some of them are Creighton teachers and others of them are just across the board that have implemented a similar WestEd type model. is this belief that we have to save all the good, authentic, creative teaching and learning for after Ames. And that's because they feel like when an observer comes in, they are looking for very specific things. And again, I'm sure that there's never been a directive or communication or a message to anybody that that is in fact the case, but many teachers ultimately internalize, I've got to get my kids ready for the CFA or the whatever, and so I have to teach in this particular way. But once Ames is over, then we can have project-based learning activities and really authentic dialogue and discussion.
And
in
from a
fact, we want the
teacher's,
opposite.
and from a teacher's perspective, I think it's legitimate. The reason it's legitimate is because of the way it was taught.
Mhm.
They were taught as strategies, but what they are learning and teaching principles. And so the differences between what engagement looks like in a direct instruction versus what does it look like in project-based. What does formative assessment look like? So they were taught through specific strategies that were geared towards direct instruction. And so that's why teachers feel that way. But that's not the only way to get at those specific principles and the only teaching strategy that they're used. And so I think when we talked about refining systems, that's one of those things that if we could go back and do it over, we would not have WestEd teach those as strategies. We would have them teach them as learning principles and talk about how those principles apply across different teaching methodologies. And I think that's where, so when you hear that, I think it's probably legitimate because that's how they were taught and that's the box it was put in. This goes to that autonomy question of saying, okay, does it make sense that children in a lesson should be engaged and at certain levels of engagement? Absolutely. I don't care what lesson you teach or how you teach it. If the students are not engaged with it, they're not going to learn it. Mm-hmm. Should there be formative assessments and checks for understanding regardless of how you're teaching it? Absolutely. Do you need to scaffold the instruction in a project-based environment as opposed to a direct learning environment? Absolutely. So I think when Eric says what he just said, we recognize the fact that we have some significant work to do in terms of going back and kind of erasing the old context for these principles and building in the new understanding within the new context.
I agree, because I think that that'll go a long way to having everybody feel like, and honestly, what better time? I mean, we're starting with the full implementation of Common Core this year, and so it gives us an opportunity to, in a way, hit a reset button and say, this is what we mean when we say, and then to really have a very clear, articulated message. And, my mantra will be about messaging, right? Because we know what the telephone game turns into. We have a discussion here at the board level, and then administration talks with principals, and they have a discussion, and they interpret and understand, and then they go back to their schools, and they communicate it. And somehow by the end, it's been a bit distorted. So the more that we can have very clear, specific messaging about what it is that we expect teachers to know and be able to do, and how we are going to evaluate and monitor and support and supervise that process, I think the better. Because I think ultimately at the end of the day, when I, as a professional, feel like I know what the parameters are of my job and what I'm supposed to do in my classroom, and I know I have a lot of autonomy around creating high-quality learning environments and opportunities for my students, and that there's some accountability through data to know that I'm doing it, then I'm going to be much more happy and more inclined to stay. And I think that is probably the most effective way to get teacher retention under control in terms of making people want to stay in a place where they know that they're supported and that there are high expectations for their work, but that they have a lot of autonomy around achieving those goals. Whereas when we take away that autonomy and they feel like I have to do all of these things and I can't be creative in the way that I accomplish them, but yet I'm still going to be held accountable at the end of the day, there's a belief that there's a place outside of this district that will give them more of that. And we want to make sure that they're clear, like, this is the place to do your best work each and every day that you come to school. And we're going to let you do that because you're a professional. Having said that, we're going to make sure that we're going to monitor because we have, a direction we want everybody to go to. So the more that we can create and refine those systems, the better. I appreciate your openness to have a conversation about that because I think even just having this conversation and being able to have our meeting, posted for the 3 teachers who are going to watch the whole 8 hours of it, hopefully will make them feel like at least, we are moving in that direction and it's not just lip service.
And the challenge we always face administratively is taking the concept and operationalizing it and getting that consistency of understanding. And so when we look at it, that's how we look at it, is how we've had these conversations. How do we get it there, and what are the systems that have to be in place to help people get it there? So a lot to do. Are there any, because we're running short on time, and I know that we have another part of this, if there are any questions or concerns, we can take them now. If you want to take some more time and look at this and then give us feedback, you can send it to me via email, you can call me, you can have a conversation with Dr. Boyle. Whichever way you'd like to do it, I'm open to it.
Thoughts? How about, I see a couple board members who are up and about. How about we just, everyone, provide feedback necessary to Dr. Bogner. If there are further questions, we actually have 5 minutes until our next.
We still have another.
That's right. We have a whole other presentation.
Not so
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah,
It's only 4.
Okay.
and you can call me if that's easier, or you can, in your regular meeting with Dr. Boyle, you can communicate to Dr. Boyle, and that's why we call everything draft.
Yeah.
So, all right. Pam?
Okay. I'm getting a real short order of this. The important part of what I am going to talk about here this morning is to help everyone understand. I hope everyone understand that while there are 2 purposes to strategic planning, and one is to really guide our district, and one is for the purposes of compliance. We in our district have chosen to have one plan to serve both purposes because it's less confusing to all of our constituencies. We don't want to have 2 separate plans and be rolling them out to try to inform people about them and get into the issue that has been addressed here about messaging. The message needs to be that we have one plan. Our internal plan has been developed by us, and I won't read all of these. They're just the standard kinds of things to identify our current needs and focus our work around student achievement is the really #1 reason for a school district to have any kind of a plan, because that's our job. Externally, however, I need to be able to extract from this plan the salient points that will address requirements that we must meet to access our federal funds. That becomes important because our federal funds are indeed supporting almost probably 90% of the infrastructure that we have to address the student needs. And I'm talking about our instructional coaches, our student achievement teachers, our technology. We just have a variety of positions and endeavors here that are supported with federal funds. So it becomes very important. And the important part of the focus for federal funds is around student achievement as well. It's also important for us as a district to be able to set some guide points for schools to be using to organize their own continuous improvement plan at the site level, because they are also required to have one by the State Department. You can see here that we are accessing Title I, Title II, Title III. We also receive funding for neglected and delinquent kids. And we have to engage prior to developing and submitting a plan and a lead in the continuous improvement process, which is what we've been doing this summer and over time all year. While we were beginning to set our work for our summer leadership and seminar, in March of 2013, the State Department released a new set of standards for effective local educational agencies. The final copy of that was released just this past week, and its purpose is to provide a framework around which a district should organize and measure itself against a set of standards to develop its district level continuous improvement plan for the purpose of accessing federal funds. There are 6 standards, and you can see them here. They are continuous improvement, LEA leadership, curriculum and instruction systems, supplemental support and intervention services, data assessment and evaluation, and stakeholder relations. These are the areas around which the State Department and the federal government wants us to organize our systems. These are the systems they want us to look at in order to target the use of our federal funds. It's how well we are meeting the indicators under each of these standards. And in your binder in blue, you have the set of standards and the indicators that are found under each standard. And you can look at those separately, and we can talk about them at a later date given the time that we have here. We did in our district take these standards and the indicators to our leadership council in April. We looked at each standard and the indicators under them, and we identified ways that we would measure our system against these standards. So we, in essence, did a kind of a little mini evaluation of where we were. We had identified about 3 to 5 ways of meeting each indicator. We then did the strategic planning process that Dr. Bogner was addressing. And at the conclusion of those few days, we took the plan that you were just looking at, we looked at the standards, and we matched up, where do I think this particular activity or objective or strategy or annual initiative might fall in this plan. And it is from there that I will be using the plan as a framework for the development of our SIP. The interesting thing that has happened over the last few years is the State Department receiving a waiver from the federal government for a number of the NCLB, which we are no longer calling NCLB. We are back to the appropriate title. It's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And so districts no longer are in improvement at the federal level now, only schools, no longer districts. So we don't have to have SMART goals except in one place. And the one place that we have to have a SMART goal is how we are addressing our supplemental support and intervention student services for students that are falling into that bottom quartile or who are not meeting the standards, because that's what we're being held accountable for. We have a little graphic here that speaks a little bit about how we're going to measure the management of our goals and our objectives, and you can just look at that over time. We're going to develop plans. We're going to have different parts of our systems internally, our leadership, our principals, our directors, develop sub-action plans. How are they going to carry out the steps that we've identified as necessary? We're going to have quarterly meetings of our strategic planning committee, and that's all those people that met this summer. We're going to take the information and the plan to the community, and we're going to bring it to the board on a quarterly basis. So on a quarterly basis, we'll be able to report to the board where are we in achieving what we've said we're going to do, and how well are we doing, and do we need to kind of take a look and maybe do something different? Is this not going as well as we had hoped? That's kind of our plan for managing our goals. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. We've talked a lot about it, so I suppose there probably won't be any. The really important part is you will hear talk about our district strategic plan. The plan at the Arizona Department of Ed that we have to submit on ELITE is referred to as the District Continuous Improvement Plan. As long as we all recognize that they're the same thing, that's the important piece. That the targets are the same. The language may look a little bit different because we have to address federal regulations. But we all want to be on the same page, that our attention and our focus and our direction is all in the same, all going on the same train down the road of improvement. So I thank you very much. Having no questions, I'll let you move on to your next.
All righty. If there are no further questions, we have adequate time to spend on time on learning.